Welcome back, everyone, to The Deep Dive. You know, we always like to go deep on the most interesting and timely topics, and today we're talking about something that's both fascinating and maybe a little bit nerve-wracking for some folks. That's right, we're talking about the unpredictable nature of U.S. elections.
We always hear those terms like lean blue or tilt blue for certain states.
Right. It's like, oh, that state's a sure thing for this party.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, are they really, though?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going to be diving into today.
Looking at what could make those supposedly safe states actually flip.
Because you know what happens.
Oh, it definitely does. History's full of surprises, right?
So to help us really get into the nitty-gritty, we're using a recent analysis that I love the name of. It's called Possible Volatility in Harris-Leaning States, a deep dive into the 2024 election.
Okay, so they're leaning in on the deep dive theme.
Exactly. I love it when they do that. So this analysis looks at a bunch of factors that could really shake things up.
Things like the economy, obviously always a big one. Foreign policy, how things are going on the world stage, social issues, and even how the campaigns are run. The tactics and the strategies they use can have a huge impact.
Like a whole game within the game.
Exactly. So let's start with kind of setting the scene.
Okay.
What does this lean blue or tilt blue landscape really look like?
I think a good analogy is to think of it like a basketball game.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Where the score is super close, like 50-48, with just seconds left on the clock.
Oh man, that's intense.
Right? One team's slightly ahead, but anything can happen.
A steal, a three-pointer, and bam, the whole game flips.
Exactly. And that's essentially what these states are. They're those nail-biting final seconds of the election.
So it's not just about which way a state is leaning, it's about how narrow that margin is.
Exactly.
Making them super sensitive to any little shifts in public opinion.
Right, and our analysis points out that there are a few major things that could cause those shifts.
Like we were talking about the economy, foreign policy, social issues, and even how the campaigns themselves are run. All of that plays a role.
Okay, so let's unpack those, starting with something I think is on everyone's mind right now, and that is the economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a major factor in elections.
Right, always.
Because it's tied to people's sense of security.
Their well-being.
Exactly, like,
yeah.
Am I doing okay? Can I afford the things I need?
Am I worried about my job, you know?
Exactly, and if voters start feeling economically anxious.
Especially in those final weeks before an election.
Oh yeah, that's when it gets really interesting.
Things can change fast.
They can, because people become much more open to change if they're feeling that economic pressure.
And this makes me think about how the analysis specifically mentions Donald Trump's appeal to voters in the past.
Right.
Voters who feel left behind by things like globalization and just these big economic shifts that have happened.
Right.
It even highlights how he very specifically targeted manufacturing workers in places like Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Oh, yeah.
In 2016, states that had historically voted Democrat but flipped that year.
Right, and that's a perfect example of how economic anxiety can really translate into political change.
Yeah.
Like if a challenger...
Just like Trump.
Yeah, if they can tap into that anxiety and offer solutions, even if they're unconventional solutions.
Right. People are looking for something different.
They are. They're looking for change.
It can really have a huge impact on how they vote.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note, it's not just about the policies themselves, right?
Yeah.
It's about how those policies make people feel.
Right. Do they feel seen?
Exactly. Do they feel heard? Are their concerns being addressed?
And speaking of feeling anxious, what about events on the world stage? Those can definitely shake things up too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I can think of a few global events that have happened in recent years that made me seriously question a leader's competence.
Yeah, I mean, a sudden international crisis, a conflict that's not handled well, these things can make voters crave stability.
Yeah.
And a strong leader.
Someone who seems like they know what they're doing.
Right, even if that person is known for being a bit unpredictable.
Right, it's like, okay, things are chaotic out there, maybe we need a disruptor to fix them.
Yeah, it's that kind of thinking that can really shift the political landscape.
And that brings us to another factor that our analysis highlights: social issues.
Yeah.
These can be incredibly divisive.
Oh, they are, especially in those tightly contested lean blue states we've been talking about.
Because they're so personal for so many people.
Right.
Things like abortion rights, gun control, LGBTQ plus rights.
These are not just policy debates for a lot of voters.
Right, they're tied to their values, their identities.
Exactly, and a significant event or a shift in public opinion on any of these issues could really impact how people vote.
Yeah, it could change who they vote for. It could change whether they even vote at all.
Right. It can mobilize people in a way that nothing else can.
And the analysis specifically mentions how Trump's stance on issues like immigration and abortion really energized a segment of the population who felt like their values were being ignored.
Yeah. And that's a powerful thing.
Right.
When you feel like you're not being heard, and then someone comes along and says, hey, I hear you. I get you. I'm fighting for you.
It can be a real game changer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So even if a candidate isn't winning on the economy or foreign policy, they might be able to rally voters around these deeply held beliefs.
It's almost like these issues become this powerful rallying cry.
Exactly. And it's important to remember these issues don't exist in isolation.
Right.
Like economic anxieties can amplify concerns about social change and vice versa.
It's like this complex web of factors that can influence how people vote.
It really is. And that's what makes analyzing elections so challenging and so fascinating.
Right, because you can't just look at one thing in a vacuum.
Exactly. You have to consider all these different pieces and how they connect and influence each other.
So we've got this image of a voter weighing all these different factors, right? The economy, the world stage, their deeply held beliefs.
Right.
And trying to decide who best represents their interests.
Yeah, it's a tough decision.
It is, but it's not just about the issues themselves, is it? The analysis also dives into how campaigns are run.
Yeah.
Almost like a strategic game within the election itself.
Exactly like a game of chess.
Oh, yeah.
Where every move matters. It really is. And it's like, you know what's interesting about all these factors we've been discussing, the economy, foreign policy, social issues.
Right.
They don't exist in a vacuum.
That's so true. It's like they're all intertwined,
Yeah.
feeding off each other, creating this incredibly complex puzzle
Right.
for campaigns to try and solve.
Yeah, a downturn in the economy could easily fuel anxieties about a candidate's ability to handle foreign policy challenges or...
Yeah, or a major social issue could become even more potent if it's tied to economic concerns.
Exactly.
Wow, it's like a chain reaction, one event triggering this whole cascade of consequences.
It really can be.
So it's not enough to just look at each issue in isolation. We have to consider how they all connect and influence each other.
That's right. It's about understanding the bigger picture, you know?
Right.
The complex web of factors that contribute to voter behavior. And that's what makes analyzing elections so challenging, but also so fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
It requires us to think critically and consider multiple perspectives.
Which brings us back to those lean blue states.
Yeah.
Knowing how volatile they can be, is there anything campaigns can actually do to try and control these unpredictable factors, or are they just at the mercy of the political winds?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
While it's impossible to completely control external factors, savvy campaigns can definitely try to mitigate risks and capitalize on opportunities.
So it's about being adaptable,
Yes,
ready to adjust your strategy as the political landscape shifts.
exactly. Being flexible.
Almost like navigating a ship through a storm, constantly adjusting your course to avoid the rocks.
That's a great analogy. A good campaign is constantly monitoring those key factors we discussed.
The economy, foreign policy, social issues.
Exactly. And adjusting its messaging outreach and even its get out the vote efforts based on what's happening in real time.
So they're basically playing a game of chess, trying to anticipate their opponent's moves.
Right.
While also responding to these unexpected developments on the board.
That's a great way to think about it.
What are some of those key strategic moves that can make or break a campaign in these volatile states?
Well, one crucial move is to identify and target specific voter demographics within those lean blue states.
Okay.
It's not enough to just broadcast a generic message to everyone you need to tailor your message
Okay.
to resonate with the specific concerns and values of different groups.
So like figuring out what matters most to younger voters versus older voters?
Yeah.
Or what issues resonate with suburban women versus rural communities?
Exactly. It's about segmenting the electorate
Okay.
and crafting a message that speaks directly to each segment's priorities.
Right, and that requires
A deep understanding of the demographics, the cultural nuances, and the political landscape of each state.
So data and analytics play a huge role here.
Absolutely.
Reaching numbers to figure out who to target and how to reach them.
Modern campaigns rely heavily on data to inform their strategy. They use sophisticated tools to analyze voter data track trends and identify opportunities to connect with specific voter groups.
So it's not just about shaking hands and kissing babies anymore.
Well, those traditional campaign tactics still have their place,
Okay.
but they're increasingly being supplemented by data-driven approaches.
It's fascinating how technology is transforming the way elections are won and lost.
It really is.
Okay, so we've got targeted messaging,
Yes,
What other strategic moves are crucial in these volatile, lean blue states?
Another key move is to focus on mobilizing your base. We touched on this earlier with get out the vote efforts, but it's worth emphasizing again.
Okay.
In a close race, every vote counts, and getting your supporters to the polls can be the difference between winning and losing.
It's almost like a ground war, isn't it?
It is.
Trying to out-organize and out-hustle your opponent to get those votes in.
Exactly, and this is where grassroots organizing and community engagement becomes so important. Knocking on doors, making phone calls, connecting with voters on a personal level, and reminding them why their vote matters.
So it's not just about the big rallies and the flashy TV ads.
Those things can be effective in raising awareness,
Okay.
but it's often the personal touch that truly mobilizes voters and gets them to actually cast their ballots.
It sounds like a lot of hard work,
It is.
but also really rewarding knowing that you've played a role in getting someone engaged in the democratic process.
Absolutely. It's one of the most satisfying aspects of campaign work, seeing people get excited about participating in democracy and making their voices heard.
Okay, so we got targeted messaging, base mobilization. Any other strategic moves we should know about?
Another important tactic is to frame the narrative.
Okay.
This is about shaping the way voters perceive the election, the candidates, and the issues at stake.
So like controlling the story that's being told about the election.
Yes.
Almost like crafting the plot of a movie, making sure your candidate is the hero and your opponent is, well, not the hero.
That's a great way to put it. Campaigns use a variety of techniques to frame the narrative, including press releases, social media posts, and even strategic leaks to the media.
It's like a PR battle,
It is.
trying to get your message out there and make it stick in voters' minds.
Precisely. And the campaign that's most successful at framing the narrative often has a significant advantage.
Okay, so give me an example.
Sure, let's say a candidate has a history of flip-flopping on certain issues.
Okay, happens all the time.
Their campaign might try to reframe that as being flexible and responsive to changing circumstances rather than indecisive or untrustworthy.
Interesting. So it's not just about what happened.
Right.
It's about how you spin it.
Exactly.
Kind of like a political magician creating illusions to distract from the reality.
Well, I wouldn't say it's about creating illusions, but it is about presenting your candidate in the best possible light and highlighting your opponent's weaknesses.
Okay.
It's all part of the strategic game of campaigning.
Okay, so we've got targeted messaging, base mobilization, and narrative framing. Are those the key ingredients for a successful campaign in these volatile, lean blue states?
They're certainly some of the most important elements.
Yeah.
But it's also crucial for campaigns to be adaptable, to be able to adjust their strategy on the fly as the political landscape shifts.
So like being ready to pivot if a new issue emerges or if their opponent makes a surprising move.
Exactly.
Almost like a boxer in the ring, ready to dodge a punch and counter with their own.
The most successful campaigns are those that can anticipate challenges, seize opportunities, and constantly refine their approach based on the ever-changing dynamics of the race.
And speaking of things that can change the game in an instant, we can't forget about the media.
Oh, the media.
Right. We can't talk about elections without talking about the media.
No, we can't.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information from all directions, TV, radio, social media, online news sites.
The media plays a huge role in shaping public perception of the candidates, the issues, and the overall narrative of the election.
It's the main source of information for most voters.
It is, and with the rise of social media,
Oh, yeah.
it feels like the media landscape has become even more fragmented and chaotic.
Right.
It's hard to know what to trust and how to sift through all the noise.
It's a challenge.
It is, and it's something that both voters and campaigns need to be mindful of.
Right.
But before we get into all that,
Okay.
let's take a quick break. We'll come back in a moment to unpack the media's role in all this and discuss how you can be a more informed and discerning voter.
Okay, so we're back. And, you know, we were talking about how media plays such a huge role in shaping public perception.
Absolutely.
But it feels like, especially with the rise of social media, it's become even more complicated.
Oh yeah, social media platforms are major players now in how information is spread.
And consumed, right?
Right, and sometimes manipulated, unfortunately.
It's like this constant fire hose of news and opinions, and it's so hard to know what to trust.
It is, it really is.
I think we've all seen how quickly misinformation can spread online, especially during an election.
It's the speed and reach of social media that make it so powerful, but also so dangerous.
Right, because it can be weaponized.
Exactly.
So that leaves voters in a tough spot. Like, how do we know what to believe anymore? It feels like everyone has an agenda.
Yeah, it can feel that way for sure.
So give us the toolkit. How can we be more media-savvy voters?
Well, first and foremost, be skeptical. Don't just blindly accept everything you see online.
Especially from sources you're not familiar with.
Exactly. Do your own fact-checking.
Okay, so double-check information against sources we know are reliable.
Right. There's some great fact-checking websites and organizations out there that can help you verify the accuracy of what you're seeing online.
Skepticism and fact-checking. Got it. What else?
Pay close attention to the source of the information.
Okay.
Who's behind it?
Yeah.
What's their agenda? Are they known for being biased or spreading misinformation?
So, like, knowing the difference between a legitimate news outlet and a partisan blog pushing a specific agenda.
Right, or even a social media influencer who might have some hidden motive.
Right, not all sources are created equal.
Exactly. It's about being a discerning consumer of information.
This is making me think we need a whole course on how to be a smart news consumer.
We probably do.
Anything else we should keep in mind?
Always look for evidence.
Okay.
Does the information you're seeing back up its claims? Are there links to data or research?
Or is it just someone's opinion or speculation?
Exactly. You got to be careful.
It sounds like the message is, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
That's a good rule of thumb for life in general.
It really is, but especially during an election.
Yeah, because the internet can be a great resource, but there's just so much noise and misinformation out there.
We have to be critical thinkers.
We do.
It's almost like being a detective trying to piece together the truth from all these scattered clues.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay, so that's how we can be smarter voters. But what about the campaigns themselves? How are they using social media to try to win elections?
Well, social media has become an absolutely essential tool for campaigns. It lets them get their message directly to voters, build support, and even mobilize people to get out and vote.
It's like having their own personal broadcasting platform, bypassing traditional media and going straight to the people.
That's right. And that gives them a lot of power to control the narrative and shape the conversation.
But with great power comes, well, you know the saying.
Yeah.
We've seen how social media can be used to spread misleading information and even sow discord.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
So how can we tell if a campaign is using social media responsibly versus using it to manipulate people?
One big red flag is the use of bots or fake accounts to amplify their message or attack their opponents.
Oh yeah, I've seen those in action, especially during any online political debate. It's like these swarms of bots descend and try to drown out any opposing viewpoints.
It's a tactic that's becoming more and more common, and social media companies are having a really tough time combating it.
Another thing that always makes me suspicious is when a campaign is spreading information that's just flat out false or misleading.
Absolutely. And thankfully, fact-checking organizations are doing a lot of great work to expose that kind of manipulation.
It almost feels like we need a whole new rule book for how to run a campaign in this age of social media.
You know, that's a great point. There's a lot of debate right now about the ethics and the rules of engagement in this new digital landscape.
It's uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
It is.
It's definitely a lot to think about. This whole conversation highlights just how complicated elections have become.
It really does. And it underscores why it's so crucial to have informed, engaged, and discerning voters.
Because the future of our democracy depends on it.
It does.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from those unpredictable lean blue states to this wild world of media and social media. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up?
As we head into this critical election year, remember, your vote matters. Stay informed, stay engaged, and make your voice heard. The choices we make today will have a real impact on the future.
And don't forget to be a critical thinker, question everything, and for goodness sake, don't believe everything you see online.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating look at the forces shaping our world.